Hello and welcome to the Grand Prix podcast and the Miami Grand Prix.
Woo-hoo!
And this time around, for race 6 on the calendar, it is a sprint weekend.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is the second of 6 that we have in 2025, and I'm not going to lie, so far, the first 2 have been pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've both been exciting. I don't know if I like sprint races, I'm still not convinced, but then I have moments like this and I think I should just get on the bandwagon. But again, I flip-flop over it, so I'm not sure.
I don't understand them. I don't get the point of them.
Entertainment.
Just pure entertainment.
Entertainment and ticket sales, that's it.
Pretty much.
Do they get any benefit from that, the drivers?
Points.
They get points. Instead of the top 10 getting points and getting a big amount of points like they do on a normal race, the top 8 get points. So first place gets 8 points, second place gets 7, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's a decent amount, to be fair.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah, normally, because there's a sense of jeopardy as they go into a sprint race, knowing there's then going to be qualifying for the race and then going into the race on Sunday, you don't expect them to really go for it because there's only 8 points to win and you think, I want to keep my car intact for the race. Completely goes out the window when that sprint race starts for most of them, though.
Yeah, so they get into the competitive mode.
Yeah, exactly. You can't stop a racer from getting a bit racy.
Yeah, exactly that.
I mean, it doesn't seem really fair, though, because if it's purely for entertainment purposes and there is that risk of them losing their car, then it doesn't really seem fair for the drivers. Like, have any of them been against it?
No.
It's just another chance for them to race, isn't it?
Another chance to be on screen, another chance to get the points.
I mean, they get heavily compensated by millions of dollars and get given free supercars and get to travel the world in private jets. I think racing on a Saturday with a chance of, if all their job is to score points and not crash, I think that's fair enough of there to have a low expectation of them to do that.
Yeah, that's fair.
And yeah, a lot of them don't, but whatever.
So let's talk about what actually happened in the sprint race on Saturday, because it was a really good race, actually, because the Floridian floodgates well and truly opened up, and it started raining quite heavily 30 minutes before the race began. And as a result, Charles Leclerc failed to start the sprint because making his way onto the track to line up in his grid box, he lined up in the wall instead.
He did. He railed the wall as well. It was crazy. From a P3 in Saudi Arabia last time out to not starting a sprint race is not how Charles Leclerc would have wanted to have started that weekend. But he just aquaplaned. It was far too much standing water on the track.
Aquaplaned?
We went over this last week in the tyre
How
episode.
dare you? How dare you?
I think I forgot. Probably about
you need to listen to the tyres
episode.
episode. You need to listen to that episode.
This is free promo
every day for the next week.
You might not remember. It was quite an entertaining episode, though.
Just as a recap, aquaplaning is when there's enough water on the track that the tyre only has contact with the water. Okay. So it then starts to just slide like it's on ice.
Oh, when they're cruising.
Yeah, when they're cruising.
Yeah, like when the car is basically, they're not making it move, it's just moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, of its own accord, it's just drifting the car around completely out of the driver's control. And no matter what steering they do, and they can't avoid it because it's just drifting around basically like a boat. Just moving around. Well, yeah, it's not safe, but that is what happens. I think on other circuits there's more drains and the water's able to not sit, but Miami is a temporary circuit around the streets around the NFL stadium, so there's not the same level of drains and everything like that. So it was just sitting on the surface,
and also just not a stadium or a location where you would expect it to rain. You think of Miami and you think of the sunshine, you think of the beach and all of that. So when they said it was raining, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. But also, what the fuck?
Thank you, Mother Nature.
I think the race promoters would have been gutted because they've been spending a lot, very, very, very precisely branding this race to be like, it's basically Monaco in America.
Yeah, there was a pool in some of the videos.
A pool?
Yeah.
And that was the racetrack,
during the race.
No, but they were showing the clips of all the attendees before the race actually started. They were showing a big screen with a pool, and I'm like, it basically looks like a beach club.
That's definitely what they've pushed for as the aesthetic of the race. But poor Charles Leclerc, they recovered his car, but you said it hadn't done that when the sprint race was actually happening.
Yeah, so the sprint race, because of how heavy the rain was, they tried to start the race and decided, the visibility is far too low for these drivers. It's not safe, so they red flagged it. So we had a delay to the start of the race anyway. But even once the race did get started again, I think half an hour after it was meant to be, they still hadn't got Leclerc's car back to the garage for them to work on in time for qualifying. So it was like a big, oh gosh, when are they going to get his car back? When are they going to work on it? Are they going to have time to get it all fixed up for qualifying? Which is, the issue that there is with the sprint. If something does go wrong, you've then only got like 2 or 3 hours to get the car fixed up.
Seems like they should have had an extra car.
In the cost cap era, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But yes, I mean, obviously, the main headline story is George Russell. Kidding! It's actually Antonelli. He must have been fuming. So obviously, Antonelli did a sensational lap, was able to put it on a sprint pole, but it all life comes at you fast because he was leading through the safety car, he was leading through the red flag period, and then once we got racing, he didn't have the best start off the line.
No.
Bit of wheel spin, which is, again, this is learnings. I'm not saying he doesn't know anything about racing, because the last 6 rounds, my God, he's been worth every penny for Mercedes. However, didn't have as good a start or good reaction time compared to Piastri, who was well on it, and basically lost the advantage already halfway down the straight. So he then went wide. I think he did feel that Oscar Piastri had shoved him off, which isn't really in Oscar Piastri's style. No. So even if you just told me that as a blanket fact, I probably wouldn't believe it. The stewards didn't believe it either. A few laps later, he was down in P4. He went a bit wide. He was sliding around because of the wet conditions. On lap 10, he had George Russell, his teammate, behind him. And Russell was radioing, saying, "I've got more pace here, guys."
Hint, hint.
Yes. Lap 11, Antonelli started to feel more confident, though, because he was saying, "I think it's ready for slick or dry tyres." And then we had a double yellow, so he came in, trundling around. Things haven't gone great for him, but it hasn't gone awfully. Never mind, he's got a Red Bull car smacking into the side of him. He then essentially does what we used to have,
drive-through
penalty, which is essentially what he did, which is a penalty that we don't seem to see that much now, where you used to just have to drive through at pit lane's limiter speed, which is about 50 miles per hour, compared to the 200 miles an hour you can go around the racetrack, and you just drive through the pits and then carry on with your day, which is essentially what Antonelli had to do. So obviously, it was a human error from Red Bull, but he did basically just serve a penalty.
Yeah.
And then on lap 14, once everyone else had pitted and all the top runners had pitted, he then managed to make his pit stop. But he ended the race in P7 and started in P1.
He's shown a lot of skill over the weekend, regardless of the fact that he lost his first place position on lap 1 of the race, or lap 3 of the race, because they actually took a few laps to account for driving behind the safety car at the start to test it. Just in the sprint qualifying alone, he's set a new record as the youngest F1 pole sitter in any race format because of how quickly he went around that track and managed to get himself on pole position, which honestly no one was expecting him to do, but he did it. And he set that record by some margin as well, because the former record holder was Sebastian Vettel when he was 20 years old, and Antonelli's obviously only 18, so that shows so much skill. And yes, he lost it on the first corner of the actual sprint race. And I think experience would have had him conceding that corner, realising, okay, no, there's no point risking this. The track is wet. We've got qualifying in 3 hours. I don't want to muck up my car at all. So I'm just going to let him have first place. I'll sneak into second, and then hopefully I can come back at him later. But instead, he decided to just try and make the corner anyway. Wasn't going to happen, and lost more places than maybe he could have done if he'd just conceded. But then that pure skill comes back again during that pit stop incident with Max Verstappen and the Red Bull garage, when he swerved out of the way. I mean, his reaction time was insane.
Cat-like.
Yeah, because when you're coming into your pit box, you do not expect to have, right as you're trying to turn in, another car trying to turn into you.
Yeah.
So the fact that he managed to swerve so quickly and protect all of the mechanics that were there in that pit lane is so impressive. So I think he has a lot to be proud of himself for during the sprint race anyway, even if he didn't really manage to score.
I think everyone watching was kind of like a proud parent almost.
I was.
Yeah, you were leaning towards the TV. You were waiting for his dad to hug.
I was shouting for his dad.
Yeah, for the viewers listening, Nav, for whatever reason, continually shouted, "Go and hug your son!" like it was some sort of heartfelt movie.
And meanwhile, he was struggling with the helmet.
Antonelli's dad was like walking around the Mercedes garage, hugging every bloody mechanic in there, and then going out onto like where the cars were parked up and hugging everyone there as well. And meanwhile, Antonelli's struggling to get his bloody helmet off because he can't disconnect his radio. And it's just like, oh, go on, be a dad, help him out.
He's 18. He's a normal 18-year-old.
Oh,
No
he's
18-year-old
18,
wants their dad to come over and help them with their helmet. He was just hanging back. You're saying, like, acting like his Antonelli's dad is a really bad father. He's at the bloody racetrack. He's just saying hello to his colleagues. He had to do a pre-race interview. Then he also had to do the post-race weigh-in and stuff like that. He reckons just leave and stand a little bit further behind.
I think it would have been really cute to see a big old hug.
This isn't Hollywood, man.
I think you could go online and you could see it. I think they probably captured it. They just didn't capture it at the time that you wanted them to.
I just wanted it sooner, Mr. Antonelli. All right.
It's such a weird take. But yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit more patience needed for Antonelli on lap 1, but definitely not more skill needed. He's a very, very good racer. I think this is probably the first time we've seen Antonelli make a few forced errors of his own, which I think made it feel like, oh, he's lost it. Oh, still got more to learn. But realistically, the position he's in, this will be a big learning for him.
Yeah.
And he's now got an understanding and a taste of what it's like to get pole position in Formula One and start, even though it was a sprint race, starting a race in Formula One. So 2 big learnings. And I'm sure, as most drivers, once you get a taste of being at the top, you quite like it and want to keep going there.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for him.
And now that we've sung the praises of Antonelli, should we move on to the person who used to drive that Mercedes car?
Mm-hmm.
Lewis Hamilton, for whatever reason, seems to love a sprint race.
It's because they ended quicker.
He only had so much patience.
Exactly. Doesn't want to have to listen to his race engineer that he doesn't seem to be gelling with.
Well, back in China, he came first during the sprint race, and now in Miami, he's come third. So he likes a sprint podium.
He started in P7, the gremlins of that Ferrari car, coupled with a lack of confidence from Lewis in general when it comes to qualifying, meant that he had a bit of work to do. He wasn't very happy with the car. Well, shock, Lewis happy with the car. Lap 5 is saying the car won't turn. The car obviously was turning, just not as fast or as quick or as good as he'd like. But lap 12, it was then emerging. It was going from a damp, wet track onto a drying track. Dry tyres seemed to be the faster tyre. But I thought that Ferrari did a brilliant job of pitting him when they did.
Yeah, I mean, if you'll remember, as we were watching, I was saying, like, oh, he's out of the points. Come on, just take him in. Take the risk.
Yeah. And they did. But I thought they were clever because they went onto the soft tyres as well.
Yeah.
So the most, had the most grip on the track. He was the fastest man on track 2 laps later when he'd come and got his slick tyres on. And he even praised the great pit stop guys. He did come out of and into the media pen and they were like, that was a fantastic strategy from Ferrari. And he was like, me. It's all about me. So
redemption.
Yeah. You do feel that he definitely wanted it to be known that was my call. That Ferrari were going to pit him. They wanted also to pit him onto the medium tyre, but he said, no, I want the soft tyre. And obviously we finished the race under safety car. Lewis inherited P3 from the timings of when they decided to pit. I would have been interested to have seen had he'd been able to have made a bit of made trouble of Piastri in P2 there, but I don't know if he had the pace, but it would have been interesting to see.
Yeah, and unfortunately we didn't have enough laps for him to give it a go either.
Yeah, very true. But I think a much better day at the office than he's had since he joined Ferrari. Apart from that one sprint that we all talk about when we talk about Lewis. It's that one sprint. Now we have 2 sprints to talk about for when everything else goes wrong around him. I think Lando Norris could safely say that buying a lottery ticket is always a gamble, but maybe do it in Miami for him.
Yeah.
Because he started the race in P3 and he ended the race winning it.
Yeah, I think Miami last year saw him lose the name No Wins Norris, and he quickly inherited the name Lucky Lando in Miami.
Literally. He was obviously behind his teammate. On lap 12, he was taking a chunk out of Piastri's time. He had DRS to Piastri. Lap 13, those two were still battling and hadn't pitted. On lap 14, Norris decided to stay out on his intermediate tyres later than those and almost did an overcut just to see, okay, we haven't managed to get that window where everyone else is pitted. Why don't we stay out and see if we can wait for a safety car? Now, a lot of times drivers will say, let's wait for a safety car. 10 laps later, they haven't, they've got no rubber on their tyres and they're like, okay, I'm out of the race, so that's that. But just as Norris and McLaren decide to pull the trigger on him going in and changing onto some slick tyres, there's some double waved yellows.
Yeah.
Oh, Lando's coming in. Let's get those yellows out. Which was perfect timing because his teammate Piastri, who was pitted and was on fresh rubber, then had to slow right down with the rest of the field. And just as Lando then starts to emerge out of the pit lane, he's in first. He's got no one behind him, no one in front of him, clear track. All you could ask for.
Yeah, which is pretty much frame by frame of what happened during the Miami Grand Prix last year.
Yeah, exactly that. So he did very well, and I also think he needed this. He really needed this. He needed
this wind tunnel.
He needed this wind tunnel. Yeah, he really needed it, but I mean, what a sensational... It was luck, but also he was in the right position to be able to pull it off. His driving was very good, but ultimately... all luck, mate.
And finally, as Lando was lucky, Max was not. It was a rather pointless outing for him.
It was actually a pointless outing.
Well, yeah.
Fully a pointless outing.
So he started the sprint in 4th place.
Yep.
Managed to, keep his car on track during the wet conditions and...
Managed to be out of position out of his pit box, though, didn't he?
Well, yes, and managed to get away with it.
I was a bit confused by that.
Yeah, because he was quite out of position.
He was pretty clearly out of his box. But nevertheless, it's all about racing. So the stewards decided not to look at that. And they looked at it on lap 6, lap 7. They were like, yeah, it's Miami. Let them race. So he managed to avoid that. But obviously, the unsafe release just dunked his whole race into the bin.
Yeah.
And he ended up being P17, which for Red Bull and the constructors, but also for Max's championship hopes, fading quickly.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the unsafe release affects the driver's points or the driver's time, that Max ended up getting a penalty out of that rather than the team being fined for something like that, considering it wasn't his fault.
It does seem a bit unfair, doesn't it? Because, I mean, when you are leaving your pit box, once you see that green light, you are essentially being told by all of the people around you, it's safe for you to go.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Yeah, they just didn't do their due diligence, didn't look around, didn't make sure that there wasn't a car literally coming into the pit box right ahead of him and sent him into Antonelli's path. So it was definitely his team's fault and not his, but yeah, he got the penalty. So I guess it's more to balance out the fact that Antonelli also lost time.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It would otherwise then Antonelli has basically done a penalty himself, and then Max didn't get one, so there'd be outrage about that. Obviously, for this year, Jonathan Wheatley at Red Bull was serving as their sports director, so all of the rules and regulations man, he would be the one sort of arguing the case to the stewards, as well as helping be able to tell the team what things they should be doing on track to make sure everything's above board for the FIA. He's moved over to be the team principal of Kick Sauber now.
Yeah.
And he
Downgrade.
It's not a downgrade, he's a team principal.
Well, he's a team principal, but for Sauber.
Yeah.
Yes, but however, I mean, this is a very typical move. It's similar to what James Vowles did in Mercedes when he was very, he's working within the trackside team.
And I mean, he's doing brilliantly. We'll get onto that. But...
Yeah, he's doing fantastically. But for Jonathan Wheatley, he's a fiercely competitive man. Was very embedded in that Red Bull team, that especially 2021 and the rest of Max's championships. He's been at the forefront of being able to make sure they can execute great pit stops, great strategies, and be able to tie all those race stories together.
And try to get him off the hook when he does make a few controversial moves.
And he's bloody good at it.
Yeah.
So, him going, people are then obviously, as people do in the press, are kind of like, Jonathan Wheatley's gone, Red Bull are dead!
Adrian Newey's gone, Red Bull are dead!
Yeah, so their pit stops, they had a problem with the pit stop lights early in the season, now they've got this, and everyone's first thing is like, well, if Jonathan Wheatley was here, would that have happened? And I'm like, what a stupid thing to say.
He would have stood in front of Max's car and stopped him from moving. No, Antonelli's coming through.
Yeah, like Doctor Strange, he would have stood up, levitated, start making circles with his hands, and they all would have moved around. Such is the power of Jonathan fucking Wheatley.
I didn't know you had Doctor Strange knowledge like that.
I've seen it in game. Thank you, ma'am. You could just let me have that.
No.
Well, although it was a crappy sprint race for Max Verstappen, he had some good news before the Miami Grand Prix weekend kicked off. He was allowed to not attend track for the media duties because he has a new baby.
Yeah, he's a girl dad.
He is indeed.
Or as Sonoda called him, McDaddy.
Yeah, Big
Did
Daddy.
you say McDaddy?
McDaddy, wasn't it?
No, it's Big Daddy.
Big Daddy.
Big Daddy.
He's not a bloody McDonald's burger, ma'am. McDaddy.
I thought he said McDaddy.
No, Big Daddy.
Big Daddy.
Yeah, in a video message put on social media, for whatever reason, Yuki Tsunoda decided to call him, "Hey, Big Daddy," which made everyone uncomfortable. I don't care if Yuki
Except
stands
Yuki.
loved it. I hated it. My God, it didn't stop him. I mean, imagine having, you're a first-time father, and, you know, kiss the baby, have a little hug, couple of photos, kiss your missus, and then you're right back on the plane, and they're ready for Friday for your F1
Well,
weekend.
he can't like go on paternity leave.
No, I don't think they have those. I think they have it for they have it for the sort of admin staff. I think they have it for the drivers.
Well, he's got a week off now until Imola, so...
Yeah, all you need is a week as a father, really, isn't it, to get used to the kid. They can't even talk yet.
He could take a break. Lawson comes back.
I don't think no one in Red Bull would ever allow that to go. Ever.
You're right, Christian Horner gets in the car instead. And my time has come.
But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the sprint race. I thought the changeable conditions and sort of the racing chaos that happened as a result, I thought saw a really good start to the Miami Grand Prix.
Let's move on to the main event of the weekend, which is obviously the race. But before we have a race, we have qualifying.
Ooh, no pressure.
Now, Ferrari did manage to fix Charles Leclerc's car, but I'm sure you're going to tell us all about that in your quali recap.
Quali recap?
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
try and
No.
ban me in with Ream's recap.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a quali roundup.
In Izzy's quali lap, you got it wrong too.
Oh. Whatever. Who cares?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you steady?
Not really.
Okay, well, you're going to have to sprint through it anyway. 3, 2, 1, go.
In Q1, Verstappen set a pace in Miami as the track rubbered in, with Norris appearing fractionally behind him. Hamilton's lock-up forced him to use an extra set of soft tyres, while Tsunoda needed to use a second run due to a twitchy car on his initial lap. Leclerc and Hamilton seemed off-pace compared to the front-runners, with Leclerc improving from 11th to 9th and Hamilton to 8th. Ultimately, Verstappen finished fastest, following closely by the two McLarens and Mercedes and Williams cars behind him. Meanwhile, Albon faces an investigation into the pit lane infringement for overtaking Hadjar before the wheel crossed the white line. Hulkenberg, Alonso, Gasly, Stroll and Bowman were all eliminated in Q1. Verstappen further improved his height in Q2 on his first run, while Leclerc showed impressive pace after struggling in Q1, placing the Ferraris around 3/10 behind Verstappen, indicating their current true performance without any new upgrades. The McLaren stopped the timing screens, with Piastri appearing slightly faster than Norris. Antonelli also put in a competitive time, contrasting with Russell's lack of grip and confidence. Ocon had a slide in his final run but escaped to the drop zone, while Tsunoda moved up to 8th. Hamilton faced elimination after failing to improve on his final lap due to a lockup, whereas Russell found grip to go to 3rd. Ultimately, Hadjar, Hamilton, Bortoletto, Doohan and Lawson were all kicked out in Q2. Verstappen, Norris and Piastri were closely matched, setting very fast laps early in Q1. Antonelli and the other Mercedes showed strong pace, while Russell locked up and went wide on his first attempt. Leclerc also locked up, went straight on, and had his lap time deleted. With 6 minutes remaining, the cars returned to the garages before their final runs. Verstappen then set a blistering pace, securing his first place with a sensational lap. Loris, despite a messy first sector, recovered to take 2nd. Antonelli impressed, finishing 3rd. Piastri secured 4th, and Russell managed 5th despite earlier struggles. Sainz took 6th, followed by Albon in 7th, Leclerc in 8th, Ocon in 9th, and Tsunoda in 10th.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
That was pretty much on the nose.
I thought you did brilliantly. Did not understand a word.
Brilliant. Thank you.
But I'm sure if I listened to it slowed down, I would.
Thank you.
All right, well, now we know how qualifying went. Shall we find out about this race?
Let's do it.
Well, that was the Miami Grand Prix, the race where the rain promised to come and, lied.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's disappointing.
If I could have a pound for every time that a race engineer's gone onto the radio and said, rain's on its way, and I get all excitable and then nothing happens, I'd be sitting on a yacht in Miami right now.
I mean,
because it happens a lot.
Possible rain in 15 minutes.
Oh my god.
Dun, dun, dun.
I'm loving that. That's exciting.
Ooh, possible rain in 20 laps. It'll be heavy if it hits.
See, I don't see... I would say if it stayed dry, I'd see Antonelli maybe potentially getting the podium, but if it's a wet race, I don't think he would. He's probably not used to driving in wet races.
He would have done wet races. The rain is a good equaliser, but it can be a bit of a cruel mistress, so you have to see how it pans out. I mean, it panned out terrible for him, but it's panned out great for Lewis, you know. You never know, it's a mixed bag, and that's the excitement of it.
Those on the hard tyres, so Russell and Lewis, they'll be able to make their tyres last for 20 laps.
Yeah, comfortably.
Whereas the other drivers might have to pit before then.
There were a few others as well. I think Lawson, they said, was also on hard
Yeah.
tyres.
Russell, it's raining.
Ooh!
Oh, my word.
Now,
Wet
is it or is he
race.
sweating?
Or is it sweat?
I kept tweeting because we do live reactions on the Grand Prix Twitter account.
promo.
And I kept, yes.
Oh, yeah, it's X.
On X, yes. I'll never say X. But
Weird take.
but I kept tweeting like every 10 minutes. I'm like, ooh, rain is coming. It's lap 14. It's lap 20. And then nothing. It's
Yeah.
just disappointing.
It makes me look like a liar on X.
People trusted me. There's like 2 people. People trusted me.
We had a first lap collision for the race between.
It was darker than
It was a
I
bit
needed it to be.
gravelly.
Yeah.
It was a bit more gravelly than I'm used to. It sort of sounded like Louis Armstrong was doing it. We had a collision between Jack Doohan and Liam Lawson on their first lap, which resulted in both drivers retiring from the race. I mean, if you couldn't have picked 2 drivers that they need this the least in their current situations, both
And
at...
Matt needs this least. We can't keep defending Lawson.
I will find a way. Well, no, I have a way. It literally wasn't his fault. He got hit up the backside of his car. He had absolutely no idea that it was happening. He had no idea what was causing it. He just knew that suddenly his car was airborne and then he was spinning around and then he had damage and couldn't continue the race.
I was just sad to see that the pink car they brought for this race weekend was just out of the race. I didn't get to see it because it's Barbie pink and I
It's so
absolutely
cute.
love the colour.
Yeah.
It's tacky, but in all the right ways. I think it's such a cute colour.
It's girly pop.
It is very girly pop, which works for Isaac Hadjar and for Liam Lawson. He was out of the race, so who cares? So obviously that created a virtual safety car as they had to get all the debris and the cars off the track. But I would say Williams had quite a strong performance.
They
this
really
race.
did.
Their pace allowed them to beat both Ferraris, which is a bit of a yikes moment for the Italian team, is it
I mean,
not?
it's a huge yikes moment, but we ignore that and we just celebrate Williams. Well done to
Well
Carbonneau
done, signs.
Oh.
and Albon.
And
Yeah.
Albon. But more importantly...
Albon got a top 5
well done-
finish.
Yes, but more importantly...
Oh, yoy.
well done, signs.
They were outperforming Ferrari this weekend. They qualified ahead of both of the Ferraris going into this race. And they were starting the race at 6th with Carlos Sainz and 7th for Alex Albon. And they were then able to get themselves a double points finish.
Yeah, I mean, James Vowles is doing a spectacular job with that team because getting a double points finish in race 6 is just incredible. I mean, I think they've had points every single race now.
Yeah, they're doing
which is just
fantastically.
so impressive considering last year they finished the season on 12 points. They've exceeded that.
Yeah,
They're smashing it.
they totally are. And I mean, Alex Albon finished in P5, which is an amazing amount of points. Obviously, Carlos Sainz got double overtaken by the Ferraris and ended up P9. But P9, they'll take it. There's been years, as we've seen, where Williams have gone a whole season without scoring a single point. So I also think that Carlos Sainz is starting to get into the rhythm of this car. I think he's starting to embed into this team.
Yeah.
And the performances that we've seen when he was in 2024 and he didn't have a contract, he was driving like a man possessed. We're starting to see that run of good form return back to Carlos, which is amazing to see.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What happened to Behrman and Bortoletto? Because I'm very confused.
What do you mean what happened to them?
They were both just
Oh
out
yes,
of the
because
race.
they both retired, didn't they?
Yeah, they're both out of the race, but I don't remember seeing them crash. I don't know if I wasn't paying attention.
No, so they both had issues with their cars. So Ollie Behrman, it was suspected that he had a PU issue, which is power unit issue. So I don't know if you remember, but when they were basically showing that he was slowing down, you could see like a bit of fire and lots of smoke coming
and
out
then
of
he
his
just slowed
exhaust.
down.
Yeah, so he just lost power. And, I mean, rather dramatically said over the radio, "I've lost everything," which was giving
Poor
$1 Million
guy.
Baby kind of.
Viewers, can you tell what film we watched this weekend?
And Bortoletto as well, sort of just, lost drive.
Yeah, Bortoletto, he was saying that his engine was failing and I think his pit were probably quite aware of it, but he ended up just parking his car up. He was able to just stop it safely, whereas for poor Ollie Behrman, I mean, his engine essentially said, "Fuck you!" and sort of exploded on him, and he then, all his steering wheel screen would have completely gone blank. He would have lost all his drive, would have been trundling around. He was trundling around because he had no power.
Lost everything.
He lost everything.
Yeah.
Please respect him at this time. Wait, what? Is that what you say?
Respect his privacy.
Thank you. Please respect his privacy at this time. Please respect him at this time. I mean, respect him all the time. He's a driver. He's a nice person. But the reason that he was trundling around was because he just couldn't go any faster than that. But that then triggered, obviously, virtual safety car periods and whatnot as a result.
Oh, poor them.
In an era of these cars, you don't see that many people retiring.
Yeah, we haven't seen the back of a car smoking out in a very long time.
We really haven't. I mean, in some cases, it's a frustrating thing. It sounds awful, but it's a bit frustrating because it kind of it can add excitement to races when cars, aren't able to finish the race. It means if they're parked up somewhere, it can trigger a safety car, which can add a bit of jeopardy to the race. But then for the cost cap era, you kind of don't want them to DNF because these teams, especially lower teams like Haas and Kick Sauber, don't have the money to be repairing cars left and right.
I think the most dramatic one that I remember was a few years ago, Carlos Sainz in Ferrari. His car basically just caught fire.
Well, it looked like a grenade went off. If you remember, all the bodywork on the outer sort of moved out of place for this sort of bomb that happened within his car. And it was just the engine just completely went kaput. But it was quite a dramatic kaput.
Yeah, and it made even more dramatic by the fact that he then parked on a hill on the side of the track. And so as he parked up, his car was then rolling back down the hill. So he was struggling to get out of the car. And
There's hills on the track?
Well, along the side. Well, yeah, a lot of the tracks have like different levels of,
like Mario Kart.
Different level. Yes, like sure. Why not? Sure. It's at the Red Bull Ring in Austria that obviously has lots of hills and stuff like that. So the track sort of goes up on camber and then goes back down in different levels, as Nav said. But I mean, the marshals didn't really know what to do. He was signalling them to get a fire extinguisher for his car. And as they were turning to get that, he was like, also my car's rolling. So but he was out of the race. It was quite scary. It was lucky that he didn't get any burns. And he has a fireproof suit on, but he was able to get out of the car. But he was also desperately trying to make sure that the car didn't roll back onto the track or sustain more damage because, they were in a chance for a championship constructors that year.
Yeah, because I mean, if his car just rolled back onto the track as another car that was racing was coming around, he would have become a bowling ball.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, as the 2026 regulations come in next year, we'll probably see a run of unreliability from the cars because for 2022, when the regulations changed, we saw especially from Red Bull and Ferrari, both their engines were constantly blowing up and weren't happy. And it was a sort of a swing in the championship between Red Bull and Ferrari based on unreliability. So I think, remember Bahrain?
Yeah, the very first race of the new regs.
Yes, and Verstappen was very much in the hunt. It was game on between Ferrari and Red Bull. Before the last lap of the race, he was told to come in, and that was that. And then, if you remember, Sergio Perez lost drive on one of the last corners, spun round, let Lewis be able to go past and gain a position, and it was a double DNF for Red Bull.
Yeah.
So the unreliability definitely happens when they're new to the regulations.
So if that's being affected by the regulations, is it just because there's not enough testing that's happening before the race starts again?
I think it's the same with any sort of mechanical vehicle. You can do all the testing in the world, but when you're actually interacting with the track, there's gremlins in there that you didn't know were there. And they have to make modifications to these sorts of things as they work through the season. I think a lot of it was to do with overheating as well, because they were all trying to cool the cars and have vents. They then started creating these vents that were larger at certain tracks to try and cool all of that engine so that it didn't explode and have, complete paddy. But it was just a learning curve for the engineers. They made brilliant engines and chassis, but they were still learning how to be able to get them to the end of the race and beyond that.
Shall we move on to the next talking point of the race?
Yes, we should. This weekend was not only Lucky Lando, it was Lucky McLaren. I know that doesn't really... I was trying to find a way to make that... Magic McLaren.
Yeah. Maximum points McLaren.
Maximum points McLaren.
Magic McLaren gives Magic Mike.
Magic McLaren. Why would that be the tagline?
No, she's just saying it's giving.
Oh, sorry.
It's giving.
It's giving.
There's an age difference.
Friendly fire on the pod.
Yikes. I'm young. We're all the same age. Well, they don't know that's not true. Yes, for Lando Norris, he obviously started in P2, but he then took avoiding action as Verstappen then sort of slid slightly, had a bit of a snap of oversteer, which Lando, from Lando's point of view, felt that he just pushed him straight off the track.
That's kind of become like the token excuse now, isn't it? If you're going into the first corner with Max Verstappen and somehow you end up losing place, it's, oh, he pushed me.
Yes, history dictates that is normally what happened.
Well,
because he does get very, very punchy, does Max Verstappen on lap 1. But, I mean, watching it, I didn't think... I mean, I don't mean to disrespect Max, but I feel like when he's in the mood to shove someone off the track, he doesn't do it a small amount. He'd do it the max.
Yeah, he doesn't do it subtly either.
No, and he also doesn't normally make the corners himself, whereas this one I think was genuinely just his car just slid slightly, which meant that he just pushed Lando more wide than he meant to, but he still made the corner. And I think where there has been quite fiery exchanges and battles between those two drivers, I didn't think that was what it was, but I could understand that Lando was frustrated at having to take avoiding action because he has had to do that with Max previously. Norris then obviously was back down in P6. He overtook Albon for P5. At lap 7, he was able to get past Russell in the Mercedes. And then 2 laps later, he managed to get Antonelli as well for P3. He needed to get past those cars quickly after a bit of a rubbish start to the race.
He bloody did as well, which I think shows the pace on that McLaren at the Miami track.
They were just in another league on Sunday. I mean, they've got this fantastic car, and the tyre deg they've got is very low. They seem to work the tyres a nice amount, but not too much.
Oh, I wonder why.
Well, we did see this this race weekend. We saw Zach Brown, who's the CEO for McLaren Racing, sipping on a bottle that had tyre water written all the way around the bottle.
Which, I mean, sounds gross. I know that it was actually just, normal water. I just wouldn't drink from something that said tyre water on it because it just sounds...
You're kidding.
You're being picky.
What? Why would
Wait, are you saying that if someone gave you a water bottle and it said toilet water on it, you would just drink it?
That's crazy, Nav. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if someone...
I'm sure he filled it up himself.
I know, but just the fact that it says tyre water on it, it just creates a bit of a rubbery taste in the mouth.
Yeah, but for example, a rubbery taste in the mouth? You lost your head. I think if someone bought me an Evian bottle and I saw them do it and they wrote in a Sharpie toilet water, it wouldn't make me like
It would be.
Okay, well that's not. I don't think you're saying relatable content right now.
I see a little fun trick to play on you this weekend.
But yes, this Zach Brown did this. Sorry for the rubbery taste you're getting in your mouth currently. He did this after Red Bull have said that they were using thermal imaging cameras to be able to look at the McLaren wheels as they come into the pit stops to be able to see whether their conspiracy is that McLaren are putting water into the Pirelli tyres to keep them cool and to be able to let them be managed better than others. They still believe that's the case, but there's been stringent testing across the FIA and they haven't found anything. And obviously Pirelli, the tyre manufacturer, as we covered in our previous episode, they take all of those tyres that have been used across races, practices and qualifying and sprint races. They'll take all of them back because they need to wash them, they need to prepare them ready to be recycled. So I feel like if there was water sloshing around in there, or there was an unusually large amount of wet surface area on the inside of them, or they felt heavier than usual because they all get weighed afterwards.
Well, little do you know, as soon as the race and the interviews are all done, Lando and Oscar are sitting inside hair drying out these tyres.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I think if your competitors are saying that you're cheating and you're not, honestly, take it as a compliment that they are using thermal imaging cameras in this economy to be able to check to see if you're cheating means that you are doing bloody brilliantly.
Yeah, it means you're so bloody ahead.
Huh?
What are thermal imaging cameras?
Thermal imaging cameras are cameras that are able to see heat. So they don't take normal selfies that you do on your iPhone, for example. All they do is pick up, it will be all black. And then as they're looking at, a scene right now down the pit lane, anything that comes up with heat or with an extreme amount of cold, that it will pick up in red, orange or blue. And what the Red Bull team were looking for was comparatively to teams like Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari, what colour were their tyres as they came in for pit stops to change over to new tyres compared to McLaren. And what they wanted to see was blue. They wanted to see blue because that means water and it means cold.
And they obviously didn't see shit because we haven't heard anything more of it.
I think the data's being collected as we speak, so no idea. I think up and down the paddock people are a bit like, I don't know about that. But mean, if in a twisted turn of fate, if it does turn out that they have the most amazing evidence that McLaren are in fact using water in their tyres, then Zak Brown is going to look like a right knob, because he sat there with tyre water in his water bottle, and suddenly everyone in McLaren might be saying, you shouldn't have done that, Zach. You really shouldn't do that. You're baiting them.
It was funny, but too far.
Yeah, exactly. Now they're onto us.
You've
Thanks,
given
Zach.
away the game.
But yeah, that aside, Lando Norris continued on his race story. And on lap 14, he was briefly alongside Verstappen in P3, but he ended up avoiding action once more. Lap 17 then got a bit more punchy. He ran Verstappen out of road. Verstappen then retook the place, but then locked up behind Norris. And if you remember, Verstappen retook the place again because Lando decided himself that he should give the place back for fear of getting a penalty. His engineer then came on the radio and said that was the right thing to do. So he then was able to overtake Max into turn 11, moving him up to P2. And he spent the rest of the race behind Oscar Piastri, trying to get past and trying to be able to hunt him down. But as usual, the Aussie had it completely in control.
Mm-hmm. The cool head won the race as usual. I've been saying it for a few weeks now. I think this is Oscar's season, which is insane considering how short of a time he's actually spent in F1. But I mean, his experience obviously speaks for itself. He is a brilliant racer, and he just knows how to win a race and how to lead a championship and do it really calmly.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the battles that Piastri had with Verstappen versus Norris, I think showed that Norris is still learning how to fight Max a little bit on track. I felt that the first lap incident where he sort of was saying he pushed me off, I think has showed that he hasn't quite been able to find the right approach when it comes to racing Max. But with Piastri, I noticed that it was Piastri having to do the learning on the track of how to how to be able to overtake Max. But all of that information was then being fed to Lando Norris when it was his turn. But I mean, Verstappen is a wise fox, and he was able to learn all about being on the inside line and braking, and made a lot more trouble for it with Lando Norris, which ultimately held him up.
Yeah, he also would have known that McLaren would have been coaching him through and saying, this is exactly how Oscar did it. Copy, paste.
Exactly that.
Was able to hold him off for much longer.
And if you remember, that actually happened in Saudi Arabia between the two when they were trying to get past Lewis on the tricky DRS detection line zone. And they basically said to Norris, like, oi, that old guy that goes kind of slow and complains a lot nowadays, he's actually quite clever. So this is what we need to do. So I thought it was interesting that they were sharing information. But for the rest of the race, they were sharing information on each other about who was faster and where they can find advantages over their teammate. But I think it kind of signalled they're in their own league currently. If that continues, it's going to be an inter-team battle. It won't be with Verstappen anymore.
If they win, I mean, McLaren is already very ahead in the constructors.
Over 100 points, which is crazy considering we're only a quarter of the way through the season.
And I know that if they win, which likely they will, they'll get a bunch of money and then they can reinvest it in the cars. But if the race for the Drivers' Championship is between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, what do you win in a Drivers' Championship? Is it just like bragging rights and a title, or do you also win something else?
They'll have it written into their drivers' contracts with the team that they'll get like hefty bonuses.
Yeah.
Okay. So they just get extra money.
Yeah, they get more money. I mean, what comes with it, same as winning, a reality TV show, for example, is that they'll get sponsorships, they'll get more exposure, but also...
And they get to say they're a champion.
Exactly.
They alone are a champion.
Yeah, they get to say they've won a World Drivers' Championship in Formula One, which is the pinnacle of motorsport and the highest level you could operate at. So the bragging rights, when you're getting paid millions, the bragging rights end up being quite important, aside from the money. But, I mean, the McLaren was going a second a lap faster than the rest of the field at points. They pulled out a ridiculous amount of speed. And realistically, McLaren could have pitted towards the end of that race, still come out on top ahead of Russell. Such was the gap that they were able to pull. If they had fastest lap where you could award yourself another point for going fastest, that could have been the play for them, but that has been taken away for 2025.
Russell wasn't really doing anything as well. I mean, he was just kind of happy sitting in third place, but he wasn't really pushing.
No, I mean, he's never going to catch a 30-second gap as well, because both Lando and Oscar were pretty much pushing until the end.
Yeah.
So I think Lando would have definitely, for his championship hopes, would have loved to have been able to have snatched the win as he did for the sprint, but it wasn't to be. I think Piastri had it all under control for Sunday.
Now, you briefly mentioned Lewis in your roundup of the McLarens.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to talk about Ferrari. Which honestly, every race just gets more and more painful to do.
Doesn't it just?
And I think this week we can fairly say, like, this wasn't just Lewis being a bit rubbish in the car. I mean, qualifying we'll ignore. But he managed to get up into the points quite quickly during the race. And then, Ferrari just doing Ferrari things.
I mean, aside from that, the car was slow all weekend.
Well, yeah.
You know, they qualified, Lewis was down in P12 and Charles Leclerc, who has blistering one-lap pace, was in P8. So both the Williams were ahead of them going into this race. I mean, a Williams to be outperforming a Ferrari is not something we thought we'd be saying this year. But,
this decade.
Yeah, exactly. But they did fantastically to do so. They didn't bring any upgrades for Ferrari. And obviously, I think that since they've had this disqualification in China, they've had to run the car slightly higher, which means they're losing downforce and means they can't go as quickly. And they're sort of trying to find a fix for that.
Find it faster, Ferrari.
Exactly, yeah.
We're getting tired of this.
Not good. Lewis obviously started on the hard tyre for his race against most of the top runners that started on the medium, and that was a tactic employed by Ferrari so that he could go longer, extend that stint out, maybe do an overcut or an undercut, depending on what he wanted to do. And it just gave them options to go against the grain.
But also because they thought that there would be rain during the race,
yes.
And if he was on the harder tyres, he could stay out for longer and try to wait for the rain before going on to inters. However, that rain just never came.
And if that had happened, that would have really transformed the races of people like Lewis Hamilton, George Russell and Fernando Alonso, who were all on the hard tyre going for that strategy. And it's always a good strategy to split the strategy between your two garages to try and optimise, you know, whatever strategy they think will be best. At least they can try both. I mean, but the hard tyre was not working. I mean, where you thought, you know, it was very durable, the grip it wasn't really giving, and it just didn't seem to give them much pace. So Lewis was able to overtake Hadjar to get into P11, but he's struggling to get past Ocon. Now, Ocon is in a Haas. They're obviously a customer team to Ferrari, so he has a customer engine in the back, and it looked hard work to get past that Haas. So it wasn't the best start. On lap 23, moved up to P10 after battling God knows how many laps against Ocon. And then on lap 28, Lewis got overtaken by Verstappen, dropping down to P6. He was never not going to get overtaken by Verstappen on a hard tyre with that Ferrari. And lap 29, there was obviously a virtual safety car. He pitted onto medium tyres, but he lost 1.5 seconds due to a slow front wheel change. Then his race started to get better. Then on lap 31, he was the fastest man on track with the medium tyre. And as we've seen, the Ferrari likes it when it's not fully fueled. They like it when they've burned off some of that fuel, the car's a little bit lighter, a little bit more nimble. And he was then able to get past Albon. But then on lap 36, that was when the drama really started.
Yeah.
He then said on the radio, "I'm just burning up my tyres behind him," which was Leclerc, who was sitting in P7. And then he said, "Do you want me to just sit here the whole race?" And the engineer said, "I'll come back to you."
Oh, you want me to just sit here the whole race?
It's getting feisty.
They're on different tyre strategies. I think they should let him pass. Maybe he should be saying, "Hello, China."
Oh, I'm sorry. It's exactly what I said.
Well, he hasn't said it yet.
I think that Ferrari will be thinking about it in the background, hoping that whilst they pretend to think about it, Lewis just does it on track. Be less awkward for them to have to say it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the drama then started that Lewis wanted to get past his teammate. I said in a previous episode on the Chinese Grand Prix that Lewis
Reem,
wasn't...
I think we're going to hear an "I told you so."
Yep.
Yes, and here...
okay.
Oh, well, what's that? I told you so.
Yep.
So I said in the Chinese Grand Prix, Lewis offered for Charles to get past him because Lewis recognised that Charles was faster in China. And I said that I felt that Lewis was only doing that because he didn't have any pace in China compared to his teammate. And he was doing it strategically so that in the future, he can look like a team player in China. And everyone's like, wow, Lewis has won a sprint race this weekend and he helped his teammate. What a nice guy. God, he's really lovely. No. Well, yes, but no. Because for me, I felt that he was banking a future allowance for Ferrari to give him priority to get past Charles because he could say, China. It's all about China, mate. That's that. I did it in China, so now you need to repay me. And was I right? Yes, I fucking was. Because like lap 41, he said, in China, I moved out of the way when you were on a different strategy. And his race engineer said, well, we swap the cars, we swap. And Lewis replied with, have a tea break whilst you're at it. Come on.
Oh, have a tea break while you're at it.
No, I don't want to be that annoying person, yeah? But both of you shut the fuck up, because I said this in the episode and both of you were like, I don't think that's what the case was. This is what I'm saying. Inner bastard comes right back out. These drivers will have the worst memory when it comes to like, penalties. Did I live? No, I'm pretty sure I lived. I don't know. When it comes to I want to get ahead, they will have the best memory ever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They'll be
you got it right.
an angry girlfriend that remembers, when we started dating 8 years ago.
I really enjoyed how sassy he was.
I've never heard Lewis like that on the radio in a very,
Yeah.
very, very long time. That just isn't... The frustration would have been real under that helmet.
It's a completely valid thing to say as well. I think he was obviously saying it sarcastically, as he clarified in his post-race interview, but like all the while that they are keeping him behind Leclerc, trying to make this decision at, fucking turtle pace, he's just ruining his tyres sat in Leclerc's dirty air. And he was on mediums, Leclerc was on hards. He was faster at the time. They should have just swapped him around so he could try and catch up to Antonelli. If it didn't work out, cool, swap him back.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as well, obviously Leclerc was started on the medium and pitted onto the hard, whereas Lewis had done the opposite of that.
They were on different strategies.
Yeah, they were on different strategies, and on top of that, the medium tyre is obviously a step softer than the hard. It offers more grip and it's faster, but it's not as durable. Whereas the hard tyre is the hardest compound you can get.
Yeah.
Charles was on that hardest compound. And as we'd seen from Lewis's first stint, he wasn't massively happy with it, on his car. So why you would ruin the faster tyres of Lewis just because Charles is ahead on track? They took 3 laps to decide to swap the positions. All the while, what they were really wanting to get was to get and catch up to Kimi Antonelli, who was up in P6. They also had Sainz right behind them in Williams, adding insult to injury. And unfortunately, we saw a classic case of if you're not making a decision, you're making a decision.
Yeah.
And that is what Ferrari did. They basically didn't decide quick enough. So the decision became, you're just staying where you are.
Yeah, and by the time they did order them to pass 3 laps later, he'd already burnt through his tyres. So it was all just a pointless swap around anyway, because then a few laps later, they swapped back.
Yes, I mean, by lap 44, Leclerc then had DRS on Hamilton. Lewis was 4.1 seconds away from Antonelli, and he was able to take half a second out of him, and then was 3.2. And then Lewis asked, are we coming back to Antonelli? And he was told, yes, we are, but quite slowly. And it was slowly, he was chipping away at it, but he was making incremental gains towards that. On lap 52, they said swap positions, and because Leclerc was then faster and had DRS to Lewis, they then decided to swap back. So on lap 53, he swapped positions with Leclerc, went back down to P8, and then his race engineer said Sainz is 1.4 behind, and Lewis replied with, you want me to let him pass as well?
So if they swapped earlier, then Lewis could have overtaken Antonelli.
Yeah, I think
Probably would have caught up.
Yeah, I think the point is that 3 laps doesn't sound like much, but, it's a decent amount of time, and Lewis was on a faster set of tyres, and having to sit behind Leclerc and try and overtake him on track is burning through that rubber, coupled with the fact that with all these aerodynamic cars, they're chugging out, so their cars are shaped to be able to have the air move through them in a certain way, the most aerodynamically efficient way, so that they can move faster. But all of that air that then is being chucked out the back is affecting Lewis's tyres, and it affects any car that's behind another car. And at close proximity, when you're 0.6, 0.7, or in DRS range, it just affects how much the tyres are able to move. They start sliding around. They don't like all of that air that's sort of unsettling them. And by being ahead and just decisively Ferrari saying, no, he's faster, he's on a different strategy to you, Charles, move out the way, he could have used those 3 laps to be able to continue on and be able to make inroads on Antonelli without his tyres being affected by the turbulent wake of his teammate.
Okay. So that's why his tyres got basically fucked up, because he was in dirty air behind Leclerc.
That and the fact that he was trying to overtake Leclerc. So he was, actively pushing his tyres to try and overtake him on track, when really the team should have just let them do the switcheroo.
Yeah, it was a silly call, really, because they weren't fighting for the win. What they needed that weekend was damage limitation, for the fact that Williams, both the Williams was faster than them in qualifying. They didn't seem to be anywhere in terms of pace compared to the front runners, and what they needed was just to maximise the amount of points they could have done. And instead, they ended up just swapping backwards and forwards, but making no inroads on anything else.
Yeah.
So they just settled. I mean, who bloody cares? Charles and Lewis don't care if they've come P7 or P8. It's irrelevant. The point is that they weren't able to battle anyone other than themselves.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a good decision from Ferrari. And I
after
understood
the race, Fred Vasseur tried to defend it as well and said, no, we were doing the right thing by taking a bit of time. Like, we made a decision quickly, but we were trying to weigh up whether or not Lewis was actually quicker or if he was just quicker because he was getting Leclerc's DRS. It doesn't matter if that's the case. Look at the tyres that they are on. They are on completely different strategies. It doesn't matter whether or not he's just quick because he's in Leclerc's DRS. If he's on softer tyres, which are, of course, faster tyres, let him past and see if he's able to do anything with it. If he's not, swap back. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't good because whilst the CEO of Ferrari was in the garage, ironically, Lewis Hamilton was seeing red. I noticed that Lewis, the way he was talking in the media pen and everything else this weekend, he seemed to be a lot more honest about what the problems of the car was. Now,
he was not sugarcoating a thing.
No, we've gone from a Lewis Hamilton that was very optimistic, very excited about the heritage and history of such an iconic team, very excited to get started. We've seen a few aches and pains as he starts to bed into his new team. We saw a few vague things of, I have something on my car that doesn't work compared to Charles in the other garage. We've had vague talks about him just saying, I think I need a brain transplant to be able to make anything work in this car. Last time out in Jeddah, he was basically saying it's going to be a very painful season. This time round, he basically was saying, we need this. This is all our problems. We're waiting for a fix to be able to get faster and get some updates.
He seems to have gotten his head back in the game, because you're right. He did have a few weeks of saying basically it's all on him, and he's needs the brain transplant, and that's why he's not performing well. But then maybe in the break he was able to kind of get back in that space where he's able to think properly, he's able to get his confidence back. But then that's kind of pointless when you have a car that just doesn't work for you, which is probably why he was just talking about the lack of strategy and the car not working during this weekend.
Yeah, I personally think that he's always known it was an issue with the car, and he was kind of putting the blame on himself, maybe because he expects more from himself, expects to be able to extract as much out of the car as is actually possible. But I think maybe he was. Maybe that's all the car actually had, and all this time he's been overly harsh on himself and sort of protecting the team. And this time around he's just thought, fuck it, what am I protecting them for? It's just making me look stupid.
Yeah, I completely hear that. When we look at the team standings, as well as Lewis, I mean, I think he's becoming slightly defiant at this point. Yeah. I think that the same frustrations he had in Mercedes, where he didn't feel he was being listened to, and ultimately he just couldn't get along with that car. I think he hoped that going to Ferrari would change that, and that he could have this fantastic success, because Ferrari finished P2 in the championship last year. If we look at the numbers for the constructors currently, instead of all of this driver swapping backwards and forwards being their main worry and the lack of speed that they have, McLaren are on 246 points. Ferrari are fourth with 94.
Yeah.
They haven't even cracked 100 points yet. Red Bull are 11 points ahead of them, and Mercedes even more. The thing that should be freaking them out in Maranello should be that even though they've been able to win a sprint race, they've had a couple of podiums, they are nowhere close to winning races, and they're nowhere close to being able to move up the championship order. And currently, I feel that Fred Vasseur has had a very difficult balancing act. He's had Charles Leclerc that's bedded into the team for many years, and he's been delivering the absolute maximum from the car. But Charles not happy with the car himself. No. Compared to Lewis, Vasseur's having to sort of defend Lewis a lot in the press, because the media are after it. We got sold a Ferrari Lewis Hamilton dream, and we're seeing a bit of a nightmare currently. But I thought Lewis was very bold in how he spoke in the car and out of the car. I think they need to really find some updates and upgrades for the following races. But the problem is, with 2026 and a completely new generation of car coming in, a lot of these teams are going to be switching their focus onto the next year's car and not bring any more upgrades, which means that Ferrari currently will need to start bringing some upgrades, which splits their focus from their next year's car.
Yeah, and the next race is Imola, which is obviously one of the two Italian Grand Prix that we had. So all eyes are going to be on those cars.
What the fuck is Imola?
What?
Where's Imola?
Italy.
Italy, like I just said.
What? I've not heard of Imola.
Cool.
It doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
So yeah, all of the eyes are going to be on Ferrari. The Tifosi are going to be out in floods. and they're going to want to see something spectacular. And at the moment, it is not written in the cards.
No, it's not. So yeah, I do feel sorry for Ferrari, but I think they've had some brilliant strategy calls on Saturday, with Lewis getting himself into P3 as a result of a great pit stop.
Lewis had a good strategy call.
Sorry. It is won and lost with Lewis. But on Sunday, I think their lack of pace was ultimately their biggest gremlin, because, the swapping of positions became the top story. But realistically, if they had more pace, they would both be able to be gunning for the front. They wouldn't be worried about each other. And Ferrari would be saying on the radio that we want the fastest person to be going off for the lead of this race, go for it. But they're piddling around 7th and 8th, complete waste of time for them in terms of what they would actually like to be achieving.
I wish there was a camera in the debrief room for Ferrari.
Don't worry, Drive to Survive will be on next year, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just see that the episode's going to write itself when it comes to Lewis at Ferrari, and this will be a highlight, I'm sure.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the transitional period from thinking about 2025 to thinking about 2026. That thought process might be a bit harder for Red Bull, because with all these rumours swirling around about will Max still be a Red Bull driver in 2026, they've got a big decision to make. Do they start thinking about next year's car, or do they put all of their eggs on this year's basket, with the knowledge that by the summer break, if Max is not P2 in the championship, he is able to activate his release clause in his contract?
Yes, yikes. He is currently in P3. So it's all coming out in the press, rumoured that there's a performance clause, as you just said, that could see Max Verstappen decide to up and leave from his home in Red Bull. He's currently in 3rd with 99 points, and Lando is up the road in 115 points. There's a 16-point deficit there. I mean, it's an interesting one because he had a bit of a dramatic race, didn't he? And he obviously crowded out Norris in turn 2, but he lost out to Piastri by outbraking himself in turn 1. Norris then had a longer fight with him, which ended at turn 11. But he was also jumped by Russell during the race, and he was able to hold up the McLarens, but ultimately the McLarens were just in a different league to him today. He's fighting one-handed. Tsunoda, whilst isn't making awful race results, is nowhere close to being able to help him with strategy or be able to hold up people for him. Currently, they have an issue which Christian Horner has spoken about in the press, where the things that they're looking at in the wind tunnel when they're testing the car isn't correlating to what's happening on track. Some people have speculated that might be an excuse just because they're having general poor performance relative to their other competitors. But then you see Max have these absolute moments of brilliance that come out of him and are shown right on the track. So I think he is keeping himself in this championship, but I don't feel that the car nor the team are always helping him in the right direction, and we saw that on Sunday.
And now that he has a baby, I mean, there is absolutely nothing stopping him from saying mid-season, yeah, I'm just going to take the rest of the year off, look after my child, and then come back next year in a new car.
It will never be. It's Verstappen. I just don't see that happening. I don't see him being a stay-at-home dad. I see him racing around.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking if he can activate the release clause if he doesn't get P2, then wouldn't it be more likely that you just see him in the past couple of races basically not pushing at all and just letting that naturally happen for him to be able to activate it? But I mean, he has been trying.
He's been trying like nothing on earth. I mean, throughout the race, whilst he was, in the hunt to be able to get up and around the McLarens, after being overtaken by Piastri, he commented saying it's super slippery to drive. On lap 14, a lap later, he then said, fucking brakes, man. Honestly, they're useless. He then later he lost a chunk of time. He ended up dropping away from Russell in P3 as he sat in P4. On lap 54, he was the slowest driver in the top 10. He had a bit of a moment, and the team told him to make sure you're within 5 seconds, please, Max, to Russell, because they were hoping that Russell would get a penalty. Russell didn't get a penalty, but my God, did Red Bull try and lodge a complaint against it to try and make that so. But they then had a problem with their downshifting again. So even though he's performing at this great level, there's still a lot of gremlins with that car. Really not happy. I think Max is able to drive around things like slides and oversteers and understeers because he's got such cat-like reactions that he can catch them in time. But compounding the issue is that there is a lot of media speculation about where he's going to go. I don't see him going and taking a year off. I see him going to potentially Aston Martin or Mercedes.
So we had Kimi Antonelli, the young Italian. He qualified ahead of his teammate, George Russell, and managed to start the race in P3. But by lap 4, life comes at you fast. Piastri overtook him. And then lap 9, Norris overtook him. So he was down.
He did have a short stint in P2.
Mm-hmm. He did. He very much did. He pitted onto the hard tyres on lap 25, but he had a bit of a long stop. He had 4.4 seconds as Carlos Sainz came into the pit lane. And they didn't want an unsafe release after the trauma that happened on the young 18-year-old in the sprint race. But they were trying to undercut Max Verstappen and try and get him out on the track ahead of him. But that didn't seem to work, and Verstappen came out on top after that.
Well, they had a very long
him.
pit stop. I think it was 4.4 seconds.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so it didn't work out at all. But he was then becoming the hunted by the two Ferraris, unbeknownst to him, I'm sure, because they were so fucking far behind. I don't think he was even particularly aware. But yeah, he ended the race in P6, which isn't, obviously he would have loved to have stayed in P3, but I think P6 is still very respectable for the young 18-year-old. And ultimately, his teammate was able to get a dream pit stop and was able to jump a lot of people, which couldn't have been foreseen.
Yeah.
And that wasn't anything to do with Antonelli. But I think maybe still a little bit of learning to do when it comes to overtaking and defending. I think that's maybe where he needs to learn, because I'm sure he's brilliant at overtaking and defending, but he hasn't done it in an F1 car. So that's still a learning process.
But he's making small and consistent improvements each and every race. So I don't see it very far for him to get a podium by race 15, for example.
Race 15? In 9 races' time?
Sure.
Yeah?
Oh, okay.
Why not? How many races are there?
24?
Yeah, sure. Race 15.
Okay, fine.
All right, we'll check back in on that, shall we? I think ultimately this weekend has been great promo for his new documentary coming out on Netflix called The Seat, which, is going to be out by the time you listen to this. So if you want to watch it, go for it. But I actually found out something very interesting about this documentary.
Oh, yeah?
Because when we first found out that it was happening, you had a bit of a hot take on it, didn't you?
Well, I was a bit confused. I mean, it circled around Kimi Antonelli, this young teenager, getting a seat in a top 4 team. Top 4 team?
Yeah. Top 2 team at the moment.
Oh, yeah. But it was circulating around, oh my God, this is unprecedented. This young teenager has been able to make it big in Formula One and not least be able to get himself into one of those most desired seats in the sport. But to me, I thought it was really random because we've seen people on the grid before, and I'll tell you something, 2 out of the 3 champions were both very young when they were put into the sport, into big teams. I didn't feel like it was a new storyline that we've never seen before, because actually people like Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton has actually given teams a lot of confidence to start employing younger drivers and be able to just give them a chance, be able to nurture the talent within the team and be able to go on to win in a big team. If you look at Charles Leclerc, he's one of those young people that was given a chance by Ferrari.
Also, Antonelli wasn't the only one this year to get into a big team. Lawson started out in Red Bull.
Yes, one of 6 new rookies that came to the table, and on top of that, you have Lewis. Lewis was put straight into McLaren when he joined Formula One. Lots of people
As was Lando.
Exactly. So when you look up and down the grid, you think, hang on a second, there's not a story here. This Antonelli being young and being put into a top team is simply just how the sport works nowadays. So I found it strange that they were going to do a whole documentary on Kimi Antonelli? ?
Well, I've got some insider information for you.
You definitely don't.
Insider.
Well,
who's your insider?
LinkedIn.
That's terrible insider.
But I can tell you what the storyline for this documentary is. Now, it's called The Seat. It's coming out on Netflix, and it is essentially an ad for WhatsApp.
Yikes. Also, The Seat is such a boring name.
Oh, yeah.
You have cars that go 200 miles per hour, a young new talent onto the sport, generational talent he could be, and you're going to work The Seat.
The quote for this that I have is, many of the discussions that resulted in Mercedes choosing young Italian driver Kimi Antonelli played out over messaging app WhatsApp. The result is a 1-hour documentary on Netflix, a brand-funded story that can be an effective solution for both Formula One and WhatsApp, especially when the youngest fans are prolific ad skippers, ad blockers, and ad ignorers. Crafting stories that incorporate brands natively is proving more elegant and can be cost-effective. And a quote from Meta here, "We don't believe we should be limited by ad formats. Storytelling allows us to occupy a unique position in the hearts of users and pushes beyond the functional role we play." So essentially, WhatsApp have paid to create a documentary about how Toto Wolff and Kimi Antonelli had a WhatsApp video call when they told him that he was going to be the Mercedes driver, which, of course, we saw in Drive to Survive.
What a random documentary.
Yeah, it's basically just an ad for WhatsApp.
I mean, I can understand, now knowing that, you can understand why it's been made, because Antonelli's never going to say no to more exposure. He has obviously had a wonderful sprint pole lap that he set this weekend, so it coincides lovely. I do feel that it felt so random. It felt like we're hyping up this teenager that's just blinking into the spotlight and suddenly it's got a documentary series. Such is the landscape of Formula One currently, though, that this would never have been...
galore.
Yeah, this would never have been a talking point nor an idea for any brands like WhatsApp, even 4 years ago. You know, this is showing how mainstream Formula One is becoming, and all of these brands are coming up wanting to mop up some of that money because it's a complete gravy train.
I mean, thankfully he's been doing well. Imagine if he was doing shit up until now and then the documentary's coming out.
Yeah, the promo wouldn't be cute.
No, it would not.
Now, we've got a bit more organisational drama.
Organisational?
Yeah, the Grand Prix. No, I'm joking. The FIA. Once again, we are going to talk to you about the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. On Monday, before the Miami Grand Prix, he issued a statement confirming that improvements are being considered to Appendix B following feedback from drivers competing in FIA-sanctioned World Championships. This statement follows a clarification of the regulations issued to Formula One drivers that confirmed heat-of-the-moment language would go unpunished, which basically means, he said, we will consider not giving you penalties for swearing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a big clampdown of swearing under Mohammed Ben Sulayem's leadership. He joined in 2021 as the FIA president, but he has seemed quite happily and doesn't really mind getting the backs up of people up and down the paddock for different stringent rules that he's been enforcing to drivers over the last few years. And this is him starting to relax some of those rules after putting them in place and enforcing them heavily.
Yeah, basically after realising that he is massively losing favour amongst the drivers. So in 2024, he stressed the need for F1 drivers to be role models and urged them to watch their language. Subsequently, Appendix B was added to the International Sporting Code, establishing guidelines for stewards to determine penalties for rule breaches, including significant sanctions like fines, race bans, and championship points reductions.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a very heavy consequence.
Yeah.
And it outlines punishments for misconduct, including words, deeds, or writings that could harm the FIA or motorsport's reputation. First offences in F1 under Appendix B result in a €40,000 fine, escalating to €80,000 for a second and €120,000, plus a 1-month suspension and championship points deductions for a third.
That's so stupid.
Said all the drivers on the paddock.
Yeah, I mean, it's like giving like private school or like dictatorship. Like it's not.
Those are two very different things.
Yeah, but
which one?
But also
What do you mean?
low-key the same thing. Someone having an authority kink and wanting to just like keep all the drivers in line and be like, I don't care if you cheat, I don't care if you play dirty, but also if you swear.
Yeah.
You're done for.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So this was obviously seen by some of the drivers as discouraging them from expressing their views. And I mean, that's a very valid point, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like they were being silenced. They weren't able to express themselves.
Yeah, completely. And that was actually highlighted in the last race in Jeddah, because obviously Max received a penalty for something he didn't think deserved a penalty. And after the race, there have been pictures circulating online of Mohammed Ben Sulayem with his finger up to Max, seemingly having quite a stern word with him. And it is thought that Mohammed Ben Sulayem was essentially saying to him, don't you bloody dare say anything bad about the stewards or the FIA in any of your post-race interviews. Which is why then, in his interviews, Max essentially said, I can't talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty fine line, isn't it? You don't want people to be criticising the FIA or the stewards, but they also are allowed to be frustrated with the referee, you know, which is essentially what they are, and call them out when they see fit. Footballers do that. You know, every sport does that. It's about what you're saying about them. You know, drivers aren't coming out and calling them a bunch of twats. They're coming out and they're saying, oh, I didn't really agree with this. That is just freedom of speech. They're allowed to do that. But Max Verstappen, this has not been his, you know, yes, this time around he was he played by the rules and he didn't say anything. He's also been done before and has had to do community service. To, you know,
community service.
Yeah, because of breaching similar rules. So it comes as a long string of different clampdowns that the FIA has had under Mohammed Ben Sulayem's leadership. But you start to understand the politics around the sport, and the drivers are frustrated about it. They're not particularly impressed.
And at the Miami Grand Prix this week, we had some quotes from a few of the drivers, with Hamilton saying, I think ultimately the GPDA, which is the Grand Prix Drivers Association,
essentially almost like a union for the drivers,
is very unified. Ultimately, we want to be able to work closely with the FIA. He goes on to say, I think everyone, all of us, want to continue to work together and make the sport better. And of course, we've faced a bit of an uphill challenge in that communication over time. But ultimately, we don't hold a power seat at the table, and that needs to change, in my opinion. If you look at other sports that have unions, that might be something that comes into play at some stage. We don't want to control things, we just want to collaborate with them more and have our voices heard. Ultimately, people making decisions for others that have never been in that position, it's good to have the point of view from the driver's perspective, and that's all we try to give. So he's essentially saying there needs to be a conversation. You can't just make rules for us and expect us to follow them. We need to be involved in the decision making for this.
They can help them prioritize what's more important, what's actually relevant, and they can also come up with some sort of compromise where it's like, if they're going to be fined for swearing, for example, they can say it where when you're doing your post-race interviews or when you're doing the press roundups or whatever, don't swear then, because then they're able to control themselves a bit more. But then when they're literally doing the race and they're getting frustrated and, you know, they're competing with other people, don't fine them if they're swearing while they're on the tracks, because that's something you don't really have control over. And also, isn't the FIA the one in control of what actually goes on screen and what doesn't? Like, they could easily just say, don't put the radio messages that where they're swearing, and then they can avoid a fine.
Also, in the last race in Jeddah, they censored one of Max's messages on the screen, on the, you know, radio graphics, and it came out that all he said was bloody.
Oh my God.
So they had anticipated, essentially, that he was going to swear and just censored it.
Which, to be fair, with Max, I'm not surprised.
Well, we also had a comment from George Russell who said, we want to see these things put into action rather than saying we're considering things. We all consider a lot of things. We're clear we want changes, and once they are implemented, then we'll comment on it. But for the time being, it's being considered. So it's just the words don't mean anything until the change is being made.
I mean, I can understand the frustration. The GDPA put out an open letter in 2024, basically asking for the FIA to treat them a bit more like adults. This has come after as well. In 2024, the GDPA wrote an open letter to the FIA that asked them to treat them basically like adults.
Yeah.
Is that so much to ask? And
it's a bare minimum.
Bare minimum. But on top of that, the letter directly criticised the FIA president's tendency to communicate about drivers and the sport's condition through the media. So that he's not talking to them, he's talking about them through the media, which is, it's not particularly respectful, and it doesn't open a nice stream of communication between the drivers and the president. But also urged Mohammed Ben Sulayem to consider his tone and language when addressing the drivers or speaking about the drivers publicly, and said that we are adults, we do not require media instruction on trivial matters like jewellery and underpants.
Underpants.
Aha, thank you. So, Mohammed Ben Sulayem won the FIA presidential election in 2021 from his predecessor, Jean Todt. And he has had a very different style of leadership from Jean Todt. He's happy to use social media to his advantage in the past and expresses his views on the sport. Yes, it does sound a bit like President Trump, but we're not going to mention that. He was concerned about a failed takeover bid from Saudi Arabia, which was strange because he doesn't have any role in the commercial side of the sport. And it raised eyebrows up and down the paddock of how involved this man was going to be in areas that did not concern him. But in 2022, the race director for the Australian Grand Prix informed the drivers ahead of the weekend that they would begin clamping down on what they're allowed to wear underneath their race suits, stressing it must comply with the FIA's long-standing regulations. So it was under Appendix L for the FIA Sporting Code that says they must wear fireproof underwear, which adheres to the FIA's strict standard. So yes, we're all in the name of safety, but it came as a bit of a surprise to the drivers that suddenly this new guy is in power and we're out of nowhere talking about underpants. Apparently there was a long conference and meeting all about underwear, which is rather strange. But later in the year, in 2022, jewellery became the new talking point at the Miami Grand Prix, and they said there would be a ban on wearing jewellery in the F1 cars. The ban cited safety risks, reduced heat protection from flame-proof clothing, and increased burn risk injury, and also the potential hindrance of medical intervention due to snagging. Well, Lewis Hamilton arrived in his conference after that was all announced, and famously wore numerous pieces of jewellery. He wore multiple watches, he had multiple necklaces on, loads of bracelets, earrings, rings, he had a ring on each finger, and did it as a statement. He indicated that he wouldn't be bothered by the race ban, and he even said that, well, we've got a reserve driver, and there's plenty of things to do in Miami, so if they want to ban me from racing for wearing jewellery, go for it.
I don't know how to feel about, now that you've explained it, I don't know how to feel about it, because yes, I still disagree with the way that he's making up the rules, and especially with the swearing thing, and also like peeing as well, and getting fined for that. But now that you've explained the underpants thing and the jewellery thing being more of a safety issue, and there's an actual reason for it, I don't know, I don't really see it as that big of a deal. Like, it does make sense.
It makes sense to a degree. I think the main issue around the drivers was that there was this real swift change in terms of there was no communication on compromises that we brought. It was, you are going to have this happen. And I think
it was very 0 to 100.
Yeah, it felt like a very, okay, we're entering a different era here, whereas Gene Todt was very happy to talk about things here and there. Mohammed Ben Sulayem made his decisions on things, and it was then enforced without any communications aside to that. And I mean, of course, yeah, they need to make sure that they're safe. But when it came to the jewelry thing, Lewis also said some of his piercings were difficult to remove, and that he'd undergone MRIs and proved that they weren't magnetic, therefore that they were safe, so it wasn't going to get stuck on anything. He also said that he had unsuccessful attempts to be able to discuss the issue directly with the FIA president, and said in the media, I'm an ally, I'm not an enemy here, I want to talk to you about this. But a lot of other drivers in the paddock felt that the clampdown on jewellery was excessive, and it was specifically targeted at Lewis Hamilton, because everyone knows what Lewis is like. Lewis wears a lot of jewellery, and suddenly they were also calling for the idea that, like, it's freedom of expression, and everyone knows what Lewis is like. He likes having lots of jewellery and heavy chains and stuff like that. He doesn't wear the excessive amount of bracelets and necklaces and stuff in the car. He doesn't want the car to be overweight, so he's definitely not.
Yeah. He takes off what he can, but stuff like a nose piercing, that's not going to ruin anything for him, is it?
No.
And frankly, he's been doing it for years.
Yeah, so. Exactly that. So I think the drivers, I can understand your point, like, safety is important, but I think it was the nature of which it was done.
And they could have been more flexible.
Yeah, and as it should be, is having those conversations backwards and forwards, which Mohammed Ben Sulayem doesn't seem to like having very much.
Shall we move on to Ream's recap?
Ooh!
Yes. Starting off with Lucky Lando.
Lucky Lando. I think that he's still a bit behind Piastri. I think Piastri is still the one who's going to be winning the Drivers' Championship, but at least he has his head back in the game.
Antonelli on pole for the sprint.
I'm very proud of Antonelli. He's done amazing.
Ferrari woes of strategy.
Ferrari's engineers just need to get their shit together. They need to. I mean, this is the beginning of the race. They've been a bit useless, and they're fucking up Lewis and Charles's chances. So they need to get their shit together.
Still no points for Fernando Alonso or Liam Lawson.
Liam Lawson, I kind of understand, because it wasn't his fault this time around, and also he's just in a Racing Bulls car. Fernando Alonso, what the fuck are you doing?
Hey,
like he's been a bit useless. I mean, he literally, like, at one point in the race, he kind of like he messed up the car a little bit. It was just entirely his fault.
A terrible analysis on what actually happened, but okay. Verstappen's still in the hunt, but slightly further back from Miami.
Verstappen doing the best that he can. He's just in not a great car at the minute, and the team is also not really being that good to him.
Double points finish for Williams.
Good for Williams, good specifically for Sainz, but also for Albon.
Russell manages to scoop up P3.
He's just cruising.
Not true.
I don't know, he got lucky.
Underpants.
I get it, safety, but also don't be a dictator.
Damn.
Nice. I like that. WhatsApp.
I kind of want to watch the seat. Plans for tonight.
Well, that was Ream's recap, and as everyone knows, after Ream's recap, we have the Grand Prix podium.
Yes, I'm very excited for this one because I actually know who I'm choosing.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll start with you. Who is your prick?
My prick for the week is Fernando Alonso.
Oh,
which is why I was surprised when he brought him up in the recap. Because honestly, like, I get he's a former championship winner, isn't he?
2
times, and he's just been unimpressive the entire race so far. Like, Lewis Hamilton is around the same age. Like, he's one of the older drivers, and yes, he's not been doing that great. And we've also, like, we've called him our pick before on the podcast, but he's been trying. Like, he's really been trying in the Ferrari. But, like, Fernando Alonso just doesn't seem like he's trying. He's not very memorable on the race at all. Like, he's still at 0 points. And it's like, come on, like do something.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I do think that Aston Martin in general, though, are switching their heads over to 2026 for their car as Adrian Newey builds what should be an absolute banger. So I do think that is probably down to the reasons partly why Fernando Alonso and also Lance Stroll aren't, really in the top of the midfield currently. But they did have an exceptionally slow race car this weekend. Yeah. We saw them trundling around right at the back of the grid, getting lapped by the race leaders. So it's very unlike Fernando Alonso, and I don't think this will be a run of form that he'll be very impressed with. But do I think that he's completely washed and out of the sport? No, I don't. I think that he's still got wonderful racecraft and very good speed. I just don't know that he has the tools in that cockpit to be able to get him any further up the grid into points currently.
All right, so who do you think is the prick?
I don't know, you go.
Can I say the Ferrari strategy team?
No.
Oh. Okay. Well,
although there should be.
No, because you've done Christian Horner and Helmut Marko 1 week, and now you're going to try and do Ferrari strategy team.
And I'd say they're both valid.
Okay, fine, you can do the Ferrari strategy team.
Okay, fine, I'll do the Ferrari strategy team then. What the fuck were they playing at this week? Like, they fumbled the bag for themselves. The fact that they didn't manage to make up a place on Antonelli is entirely their fault. They made both of their drivers just cook their tyres being behind the other person. They weren't thinking bigger picture. They were thinking, how can we just play happy families? And ultimately, this line of "we'll come back to you" doesn't cut it. They need to stop saying that over the radio. I'm sick of it. Mohammed Ben Sulayem needs to put a ban on that quote.
Yeah.
Because when you're racing at the speeds that they are, you need decisions coming in at those speeds as well, saying "we'll come back to you," and then 3 laps later saying, "Okay, swap the cars." Like, it's just piss poor.
Yeah, honestly, if we're allowing the Ferrari strategy team to be our prick, then I'm 100% going to jump on that bandwagon, because they wasted time. They could have managed to have bagged a P6 because they were making gains on Antonelli, but they got so narrow-sighted on who was going to be ahead of their drivers to take on that battle that they ended up neither of them doing anything. Mm-hmm. So as we've known them to do in the past, they were sort of tripping over themselves and stepping on their own tails, not making any progress. And as a result, the net winner of that was Antonelli, not Ferrari.
Yeah. So who are you giving your grand to?
I'm going to give my grand to Kimi Antonelli.
Okay.
Now, the reason I'm not going to give him Grand Prick, although he did do a sensational lap in the sprint qualifying and started on the front row for the first time in Formula One for his short time in the sport, I think that there was a few human errors and forced errors from him that cost him a better result than I think that he ended up having. I think his race story was obviously hindered by Max Verstappen crashing into the side of him and not being able to pit. And in the race, he was overtaken by the McLarens, where he started third. He's showing a little bit of his inexperience, but I think that his recovery for the race to finish in P6, I thought was very, very, very respectable. And I'm really enjoying watching him racing. I think maybe he's unaware of the fact that he's unofficially been adopted by most of the people watching that race, because they found him so adorable when he was getting out of his car and, was walking around, didn't quite know how to undo his helmet. But I think that he is a budding excitement within the current grid.
Yeah, fair. Reem?
I'm giving my grand to Lewis Hamilton. Because I think that, yes, he didn't do as well as he wanted to in this race, and that was down to the Ferrari engineers. But I know that we were watching the press interviews afterwards, and Lewis Hamilton just seemed to have a different energy, and I get that you said, like, we were talking about it and you said that he's definitely media trained and that's why he's done that, but I don't know, it just seems like this race he just has a different type of passion that he hasn't had for the past few races. He seemed a bit defeated before, but he said during the interview that he started to feel, once he got past Ocon, he started to feel like, okay, he's having that drive now, he's having the control, he has the grip, and he thought that he could do it. And I think that's great to see, because even when you're in a shit car and in a team that doesn't really understand you and isn't really serving you the way that you want them to, you still want to have that passion, you don't want to be giving up. And I think he really gave it his all this weekend. He got P3 during sprint, so for me, I'd give him the grand just for really trying and not giving up.
I like that. I would say that my grand is Alex Albon. He managed to get into a point scoring position in the sprint race, but ultimately lost it due to a penalty.
Yeah.
And then finished in 5th place in the actual race. And he also had an issue with his car that he was managing for quite a long time during the race as well. Yeah.
Water pressure leak, yeah.
So I think he did a really, really good job of managing that issue and also continuing to make his way through the whole race. And I think that was just very impressive of him, especially considering he's in a Williams, outscoring both of the Ferraris. I think is a good day in the office for him.
Yeah, I agree. Can totally agree with that one.
And I was actually going to give my Grand Prix to Lewis.
Ooh.
Yes, he didn't have a great qualifying for the race, and yes, ultimately he didn't manage to get past Leclerc or Antonelli in the race itself, but he got a podium during the sprint, and that was, as we now know, down to his strategy call. And even in the race itself, he was still thinking of team strategy rather than just accepting what was happening to him on track. And I think that is the sign of a brilliant racer, when you're able to think at 200 miles per hour about how you're moving forward physically, but also how you can move forward strategically. And that's why I would give him my Grand Prix.
Fair enough.
I was going to give my Grand Prix to Kimi Antonelli. Basically, for the points that you said, I just think he did brilliantly. I get that he had some mistakes here and there that cost him getting first place and doing better than he did. But I also think it's a lot to expect from him for someone who's just a rookie. And I think compared to the other rookies on the track, and also compared to George Russell, he's been doing amazing.
Yeah.
And he's been giving it his all. And like I said, I really don't see him getting a podium being very far from now. So yeah, I'd give him my Grand Prix.
I give him my Grand Prix.
What a quote. And who are you doing?
The Grand Prix for me is Oscar Piastri.
Boring.
How dare you? He's won. This is the 3rd race he's won in a row. When we came into 2025 season, the bookies' favourite was Lando Norris, his teammate, and I think people still felt, myself included, that Oscar had a little bit more experience needed to be able to challenge for a championship. Nope, that was a load of old fucking bullshit. He's on it, and I think he did some sensational overtaking when it came to Verstappen, and was able to force Verstappen to be able to overcook his brakes and go wide and be able to get past him without too much trouble. And yes, he does keep his head down. He's not an overly emotional driver. He gets the job done. But currently, he is the driver to beat. And with the car being that dominant, he's making it look even more dominant with him behind the wheel.
All right, so we have a majority decision that Ferrari strategists are our prick of the race.
I think Lewis that's a result Lewis can be proud of. I think. Yeah. I think with all his radio messages, I think he'll be happy with that.
And Lewis himself has had 2 votes, one for Grand and one for Grand Prix. So where do we put him?
Ooh.
So for Grand, I said Kimi Antonelli. You said Lewis Hamilton, and you
I said Alex Albon.
I'm actually very tempted to give it to Alex Albon, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
A P5 at the end of that race, with having 2 Ferraris behind you, is a sensational result for that team. And it shows that they are really on the up. And when they have an opportunity to exploit good results, they do. They don't fumble it. So I'm actually more tempted to go for Alex Albon personally, but it's a democracy.
Yeah, I mean, I said it, so I'm happy to put him there.
Oh yeah, you're outvoted. Goodbye. Okay. You are the weakest link.
All right, so Alex Albon is our Grand, which I think then means that Lewis Hamilton should be the Grand Prix, considering he got 2 votes for a podium position.
But so did Antonelli.
Did he?
Yeah, Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Ooh,
for Iz
okay.
and Grand for me.
Which one do we give where?
It's out with the old, in with the new. Sorry.
Copyright.
Well, you're the no. Who's the decision breaker here?
Nav.
You're the decision maker.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not. You voted Lewis.
Oh, wait,
we've all had a
newsflash,
vote
Reem.
at
We're all
somewhere.
the decision maker here.
I'm not Mohammed Ben Sulayem. I run a democracy here.
I mean, this is biased because I'm the one who put him as Grand Prix, but I push for Antonelli.
I push for Lewis.
I push for Antonelli.
Hey!
It's out with the old, in with the new.
Copyright!
Skies of grey. Sorry.
Hello, skies of blue.
You had to finish it. You could have not leave it unrhymed.
All right, fine, Antonelli, I guess.
Why are you disappointed? He's done great.
I mean, he has done really well over the weekend. He's also ruined his own opportunities at several times. Lewis has made the most of the opportunities that have been given to him, and even the ones that weren't given to him.
I don't know. His qualifying is poo, Nav.
His qualifying is poo, but I mean,
was at Q2.
Yeah.
yeah, but Antonelli's qualifying is great, but then his race was a bit poo.
But he's a young boy.
And also, he still ended up in like 6th. That's not poo.
But yes, he finished P6, but he also started P3. Lewis started where? P12 and ended up P8.
P8.
Yeah.
We've seen Lewis charge up the field. May I remind you of Brazil 2021? Now that he'd be getting Grand Prix for. Today, come on. I mean, not from 12th to 8th.
But he was racing with his hands tied. I mean, Ferrari were fucking him over left, right and centre.
And whilst his hands were tied, Antonelli was free. He was driving in the winds of Miami.
breaking free.
I like that. He was having so much fun in the Floridian sun or rain, whatever. But either way, I think, well, it doesn't matter. There's no conversation to be had. You are outvoted. You are the weakest link. It's Antonelli.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That is the Miami Grand Prix and the Miami Grand Prix episode.
Woohoo!
And next race is, as we said, Imola, which is an Italian Grand Prix, one of 2, and a home race for Ferrari. So let's hope that our pricks of this week don't become our pricks of next race as well. Next week, we do not have a race, but we do have another information-packed episode for you, and this one is not on tyres, Reem will be delighted to know. It is instead on, drumroll please,
It's not a drum roll,
Yeah, I
man.
can't do that. Shush.
regulations.
Yay! I don't know how you want me to react to that. I know it will be a fun. I know it will be a fun episode because the information-heavy ones are fun episodes. But if you just say tires or just say regulations, to me that gives no interest.
Brilliant. Well, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a real humdinger.
Same.
We are preparing a nice information-filled episode that is going to inform you all about the regulations for 2026 and maybe have a deep dive into the 2022 regulations that we are currently in. But then we're going to go to a European triple header of 3 races. Imola, Monaco, Barcelona.
Well done.
Thank you.
I thought you'd forgotten for a second. Well, like the tyres episode that we did last week, we will be putting out a question on our social media asking you to submit any questions that you have about these regulations. So make sure that you are following us on Instagram and checking our Instagram stories, because that is where our request for questions will be coming in. Thank you to everyone that did send in questions for the tyres episode. Make sure you get in your regulation questions now. As well as on Instagram, you can also find us on X, or Twitter as Reem still calls it, as well as TikTok and YouTube. Make sure you follow us, like our content, and for our podcast, make sure you subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. It massively helps.
Does it massively help?
I don't know. It's just what people say, isn't it?
It gives promo.
I was going to say, I don't know if it does massively. I mean, it's lovely, but I don't know if it helps.
It helps our ego
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, fine.
and our self-esteem. And that is it. See you next time around.
Bye!